The wind howled like 1,000 lost souls outside the window pane, thick with frost. Inside the small, warm kitchen, Walter sat alone. The crackle of the fire in the wood stove a comforting counterpoint to the blizzard's fury. From the living room drifted the muffled sounds of his family. Laughter, the clink of glasses, the low murmur of conversation as they waited for the televised holiday address. They were young, full of life and the energy for celebration. Walter didn't begrudge them their joy. At 81, he cherished quiet moments like this, wrapped in the familiar embrace of his home while the storm raged. There was something about the relentless snow and the keening wind that stirred the deep waters of memory, pulling long submerged recollections to the surface. Tonight, one memory, dark and chilling, refused to stay buried. It demanded to be told, a specter rising from a December night long past. It was December 1969. Walter, then a younger man with a thick head of dark hair and hands roughened by work, lived with his wife Eleanor and their teenage daughter Lily in a modest house on the outskirts of a small town nestled deep in the pine forests of the Pacific Northwest. Life was simple, quiet, and suited them. Walter had never owned a car. The expense and the constant maintenance felt like burdens he didn't need. His pride and joy, his reliable steel steed, was a well-maintained vintage motorcycle, a sturdy companion for errands and the occasional longer trip into the surrounding wilderness. That old bike still sat in his garage, though now mostly disassembled by a curious grandson. That particular evening, Walter found himself delayed in the nearby hamlet of Pine Creek, a cluster of houses barely clinging to the edge of civilization, separated from his home in Timber Falls by a lonely 3-mile stretch of highway. The task that brought him there was mundane, long forgotten, perhaps helping a neighbor repair a generator or delivering firewood. The details had faded, replaced by the stark terror of the journey back. He should have stayed the night. Pine Creek had a spare room offered by the friend he'd assisted. The sky had been threatening snow all afternoon, the air biting cold. But Walter, ever practical and eager to return to his own hearth, his wife's warm embrace and his daughter's chatter, decided to chance it. He'd made the trip countless times. Straight shot, 3 miles. What could go wrong? He kicked the motorcycle to life just after 8:30, the engine's familiar growl a small comfort against the deepening gloom. Crossing the narrow bridge over the swollen, icy waters of the Blackwater River on the outskirts of Pine Creek, he felt the first real sting of the wind. Beyond the bridge, the highway stretched ahead, a dark tunnel carved between towering walls of snow-laden pines. The headlight beam cut a frail swath through the swirling chaos, illuminating fat, driving flakes that danced like frenzied moths before vanishing into the abyss. The ditches flanking the road were choked with drifts easily 6 feet high. The skeletal trees, burdened with snow, seemed to sway and reach with skeletal fingers in the gale. He was utterly alone. Not a single car passed in either direction. The roar of his engine was swallowed by the banshee wail of the wind, a sound that scraped raw against the nerves. The cold was brutal, a living thing that seeped through his layers. Thick wool sweater, quilted flannel jacket, sturdy canvas coat, leather gloves. It numbed his cheeks, his nose, made his fingers ache despite the gloves. A profound sense of unease settled over him, deeper than the cold. The beauty of the winter landscape curdled into something menacing. The pines seemed less like sentinels and more like watchers. What a fool, he thought, teeth chattering. Should have stayed put. If this old bike coughs out here. Walking 3 miles in this? He'd be a frozen statue before he made it halfway. Images of Eleanor and Lily flashed in his mind, sharpening his fear into a knife's edge. He hunched lower over the handlebars, trying to shield his face from the stinging needles of ice. That's when he saw it. A figure, materializing out of the swirling snow and darkness, directly in the center of his headlight beam, maybe 30 feet ahead. It was so sudden, so impossible, that Walter's heart slammed against his ribs. He wrenched the handlebars violently to the left, the motorcycle fishtailing wildly on the icy pavement, tires screaming. He nearly dumped it, wrestling the machine back under control, his breath coming in ragged gasps that fogged the inside of his helmet visor. He skidded to a precarious stop a few yards beyond where the figure had stood. Trembling, Walter turned. The man was still there, swaying slightly, illuminated by the bike's tail light and the diffused glow from the headlight reflecting off the snow. He wore a heavy, dark brown work jacket, thick, snow-dusted boots, and a fur-lined trapper hat pulled low over his ears. But it was his face that stopped Walter's breath. It was a mask of horror. Dried, dark blood caked one side, smeared across his neck and staining the collar of his jacket. It looked old, crusted, not fresh. His eyes were wide, rolling wildly in their sockets, showing too much white. They held a depth of terror that was almost feral. Puffs of vapor exploded from his lips with each panicked breath. Walter's own panic surged. Every instinct screamed to kick the bike back to life and flee. Leaving a man out here was a death sentence. He couldn't do it. Swallowing the cold lump of fear in his throat, Walter dismounted, his boots crunching in the deep snow at the roadside. He approached cautiously. "Mister?" he called out, his voice thin against the wind. "You okay? You need help?" He reached out slowly, his gloved hand touching the man's shoulder. The man flinched violently, a choked sob escaping him. Walter gave a gentle tug. "Hey, talk to me." The touch seemed to shatter something within the stranger. He jerked his head up, those terrified eyes locking onto Walter's. "Help!" he shrieked, the sound raw and desperate, cutting through the wind's howl. "Oh God, help me! Get me out of here, please!" He stumbled forward, collapsing against Walter, burying his bloody face in Walter's shoulder, his body racked with violent, gasping sobs. He stank of sweat, cold earth, and something coppery beneath it all. Walter staggered under the man's weight, struggling to hold him upright. "What happened?" Walter yelled over the wind, trying to push the man back to get a better look at him. "What's out here?" The man lifted his head, tears cutting tracks through the grime and blood on his face. His gaze darted wildly towards the dark wall of trees beyond the snow-choked ditch. He pointed a shaking, mittened hand. "Back there." I followed the tracks. My tracks. He gestured vaguely at a set of deep boot prints leading from the road, disappearing over the drift into the forest. In the woods. I found it. The thing. Walter strained to see where he pointed, but the headlight barely penetrated the swirling snow and the dense pines beyond the ditch. Darkness pooled there, thick and impenetrable. Found what? An animal? A person? Not a person! The man howled, a note of hysteria rising. "I shot it! Point blank! Buckshot! It just laughed! It kept coming!" His voice dropped to a horrified whisper. "I cut it, hacked it, with the axe, pieces. But the head wouldn't stop. It kept talking, laughing. Oh God, the laughing!" He began to giggle then, a high-pitched, unhinged sound that quickly spiraled into full-blown, shrieking laughter, bordering on screams. "It wouldn't die. It's not human. I couldn't kill it. I couldn't. Walter felt a chill that had nothing to do with the blizzard crawl up his spine. The man's words were insane, the product of shock or madness, but the raw terror in his eyes was undeniably real. Okay, Walter said, trying to project calm he didn't feel. Just get on the bike. Behind me. We're getting out of here. He needed to move, to get this shrieking wreck of a man away from whatever nightmare he'd stumbled into. He pushed the man towards the idling motorcycle. As Walter swung his leg over the saddle and gripped the handlebars, the man clambered on behind him, his arms locking around Walter's chest in a death grip that was dangerously tight, cutting off his air. The man buried his face against Walter's back, his body trembling violently. He kept muttering, his voice muffled by Walter's coat, but chillingly clear. Pieces, laughing head, talking, not human. Couldn't kill it. Couldn't kill it. Walter twisted the throttle, eager to be gone from this cursed stretch of road. Just as the bike lurched forward, a sound tore through the night that froze the blood in Walter's veins. It came from the woods, from the direction the man had pointed. A scream. Not an animal's cry, but a human scream, a woman's scream, ripped from a throat in unimaginable agony. It was long, piercing, full of a terror so profound, it seemed to vibrate in Walter's own bones. It rose, peaked in a shattering crescendo of pure, unadulterated horror, then warbled down into guttural, choking sobs before dissolving into the wind. Walter's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The scream echoed in his skull. He was truly alone out here, on a dark road in a blizzard, with a raving madman clinging to his back, and something monstrous in those woods. The stranger was no help. He was a liability, lost in his own private hell. If the bike failed now, Walter didn't finish the thought. He gunned the engine, the rear tire spitting snow and ice as they surged forward. The scream had stopped as abruptly as it began, leaving only the mocking howl of the wind. Then, impossibly, it began again, but different this time. Lower, deeper, a basso roar of fury that seemed to shake the very trees. It built, vibrating through the ground Walter felt through the bike, then abruptly cut off, replaced by a peal of utterly insane, gleeful laughter that rolled out of the forest like thunder. Then, silence. A silence more terrifying than the screams. Only the wind remained, whispering secrets Walter didn't want to hear, scouring his skin with icy teeth. He drove like a man possessed, leaning into the wind, the motorcycle straining against the deepening drifts. The stranger clung like a limpet, his arms a vice, his terrified mutterings a constant maddening drone against Walter's neck. Laughing head, wouldn't die. Talking, cut it, couldn't kill it. Not human. Each repetition was a hammer blow to Walter's frayed nerves. The 3 miles felt like 30. Every shadow in the headlights seemed to writhe. Every groan of the straining engine sounded like the beginnings of that awful laughter. Relief, sharp and dizzying, flooded him when the first scattered lights of Timber Falls finally pierced the snow-lashed darkness. Warm, yellow beacons of civilization. He didn't stop until he reached the familiar intersection of Main Street and Oak Avenue near the town's small police station. He skidded to a halt. "Here," Walter rasped, prying the man's arms loose with difficulty. His voice was raw from shouting over the wind and fear. "Get off. Go inside the station. Tell them what happened. Tell them about the woods." The man stumbled off the bike, swaying on his feet. He looked at Walter, his eyes still wide with residual terror, but some semblance of awareness seemed to flicker. "Thank you," he mumbled, his voice hoarse and broken. "Thank you." Then he turned and shuffled unsteadily towards the dimly lit entrance of the police station, a dark shape swallowed by the swirling snow. Walter didn't wait. He roared away towards home, the image of that blood-caked face and the memory of that soul-shattering scream etched into his mind. The warmth of his small house, the sight of Eleanor's worried face as he burst through the door, Lily's startled gasp. It was a balm. He stammered out an explanation about the storm, the cold, skirting the edges of the terrifying encounter, focusing on the difficulty of the ride. He couldn't bring himself to voice the stranger's ravings or that awful scream. He was safe. The nightmare was over. He told himself this firmly, repeatedly, as he sat by the fire later, a mug of hot coffee clutched in his still trembling hands. Eleanor fussed over him. Lily chattered about her evening. Normalcy reasserted itself, pushing the icy terror of the road to the periphery. He slept fitfully that night, the wind rattling the windows like bony fingers. The illusion of safety shattered the next morning with the thud of the newspaper on the porch. The headline screamed up at him, "Grisly Discovery Near Pine Creek." Walter's hands shook as he unfolded the paper. The report was sparse, the details horrifying. Early that morning, a local trapper had found the body of a young woman near the banks of the Blackwater River, disturbingly close to the Pine Creek Bridge. She hadn't just been killed, she had been savagely dismembered. Her frozen, mutilated remains had been found partially stuffed into a drainage culvert. The killer had used a farm implement. The paper mentioned a sickle found nearby, its curved blade crusted with frozen gore. One detail struck Walter with the force of a physical blow. The reporter noted the victim's face, despite the horrific trauma, bore an expression described as a triumphant smile. No identification had been found. Authorities were canvassing Pine Creek and Timber Falls for leads. Walter sank onto a kitchen chair, the newspaper slipping from his numb fingers. The room seemed to tilt. The coffee he'd just sipped turned to acid in his stomach. The stranger, the blood on his face, his ravings. "I cut it, hacked it." Triumphant smile. Oh God, had he picked up the killer? Had that terrified, blood-smeared maniac butchered some poor girl before staggering onto the highway? Walter's mind raced. He should call the police. Right now. Tell them about the man he'd dropped at the station. Describe him. But a cold, paralyzing fear seized him. Fear of being implicated? Fear of the man's connections? Or fear of the words that echoed in his memory, chilling him more deeply than the winter air? "I shot it. It laughed. I cut it." But the head wouldn't stop. Talking. Laughing. It wouldn't die. It's not human. I couldn't kill it. Had he picked up a murderer? Or had he picked up a witness to something else? Something the man truly believed was unkillable. Walter rationalized it away. Shock. Trauma. The man had cracked, witnessed a horrific murder, and his mind concocted the story of the unkillable thing to cope. That had to be it. He didn't make the call. The silence of his kitchen pressed in on him, heavy with dread. 2 days later, a smaller article appeared, buried on page 3. Walter almost missed it. The headline was blunt: "Morgue break-in, body missing." The dismembered remains of the Pine Creek victim had been transported to the county morgue in the next town over. During the night, the body had vanished. The heavy door showed no signs of forced entry. The night attendant, an experienced mortician, reported hearing slow, dragging footsteps echoing down the corridor shortly before discovering the empty slab. He described the sound as shuffling, like something heavy being pulled. There were no other witnesses, no leads. Walter read the article twice, then a third time. The words blurred. The comfortable explanation of a deranged killer evaporated, replaced by a yawning pit of supernatural dread. The stranger hadn't been raving. It wouldn't die. The triumphant smile on the dead girl's face. Had it been triumph or something else? Something that walked out of that morgue? He remembered the man's frantic question. How did he get from the murder scene near Pine Creek to the highway near Timber Falls in that blizzard? Walter had assumed the man fled the scene. Now, a more horrifying possibility emerged. Had the thing pursued him? Was the stranger not the killer, but the only one who had escaped it? Decades had passed. Walter was an old man now, sitting safe by his fire. But the storm outside, so like the one on that long-ago night, stirred the embers of that old terror. Logic said it was impossible. Time buried all things, but logic hadn't heard the scream from the woods. Logic hadn't seen the raw, unvarnished terror in that blood-streaked face. Logic couldn't explain a body vanishing from a locked morgue. He thought of the stranger, wherever he was. Did he ever hear a knock at his door on a stormy night? Not the polite chime of a doorbell, but a heavy, insistent thud, thud, thud. And when he went, heart-pounding, to ask, "Who's there?" would there be only the mocking howl of the wind in response? And if, driven by fear or foolish courage, he opened the door, what would stand on his threshold? Would it be a young woman, impossibly whole despite the memories of dismemberment, a frozen sickle clutched in a waxen hand, that same triumphant or knowing smile playing on dead lips? Or would it be something far worse, reassembled but wrong, its head perhaps lolling at an unnatural angle, whispering secrets only the madman and Walter had glimpsed? A thing that couldn't die. Walter shivered, pulling his cardigan tighter. The fire crackled, but the warmth couldn't reach the cold knot of fear deep inside him. He was a witness, and in the stories, the old stories whispered on nights like this, witnesses were dangerous loose ends. The storm shrieked against the window. How long, Walter wondered, staring into the hypnotic flames. Does an unkillable thing hold a grudge? The wind seemed to carry an answer, a faint, distant echo of laughter tangled in its mournful cry. The past wasn't buried. It was out there, walking in the storm, patient and cold and very, very hungry. And it remembered the man on the motorcycle. It remembered Walter,